So you have a family, and somebody in the family loves railroads, and somebody in the family loves knowing more about the Civil War, and somebody has a deep reverence for Abraham Lincoln. Gee, what can you do? Oh, yeah, here it is. How about steam into history in New Freedom, Pennsylvania? I'm Ken Kidrowski, and you're on location. Glad to see you here on location, and we're on location, as you know already, at Steam Into History in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. And for a boy from originally from Buffalo, New York, who grew up with a father who worked on the New York Central Railroad and learned to love and respect and honor every inch of track in and around the Buffalo, New York area, look what I'm standing next to here. Can you imagine this thing? I mean, it's just too good to be true for a big guy now who still loves his Lionel trains. Yes, that's right. Sheldon Cooper and Ken Kidrowski both love O-gauge, because it's O-gauge or no gauge, except this gauge. This is just phenomenal. And this guy who's patiently waiting for me to talk to him is Steve Burkholder, and he is the superintendent of this rail line. That's impressive. Superintendent. What does a superintendent do on a rail line?
Basically, I manage all the operations affairs, everything from the crew training, all the scheduling, and as of right now, the maintenance.
So you're taking care of the nuts and bolts and everything about
Right.
the railroad, and then you get those pencil pushers back in the office who just oh, bring me another Diet Coke, will you please? Yeah, but you're doing all the spinny stuff out here.
Well, yeah, but to me, that stuff is the hard stuff, you know?
Yeah.
As long as I don't have to worry about that, I'm okay.
Tell me the truth, you would do this for free, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I probably would.
Yeah.
On a day like today.
Yeah, on a day like today. I know.
I mean, it doesn't get much better than a nice fall day.
I know. I would tell the people at Armstrong that I would do this show for free today, but they'd probably listen, and and I don't get the little check and all that stuff. So that wouldn't be worth it. Well, as long as we're here, this is I can read number 17.
That's correct.
Besides number 17, does she have a name? Has anybody ever given her a
the York 17?
York. She's not Mary or Janice or anything like that. Or?
No, we have a plaque on for Bill Simpson.
Okay.
He was the man who started this whole idea.
So yeah, he got the ball rolling.
He did. It was basically his idea, his dream, and a bunch of people got together and made it happen.
So is he the one who originally got the blueprints together?
He started the whole process. Yeah.
Okay. So, to me, and to anybody else, they look at it and say, okay, this looks like a Civil War era choo-choo.
That's correct.
I'll use a technical term. It is choo-choo after all.
We use choo-choo a lot ourselves.
Yeah, do you?
We do.
Then I don't feel like such a nerd. And so this little engine that can, how old is she?
About 6 years old.
See, it's just, it looks like it should be, 106, if not more.
Well, we try pretty hard.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's just, can you tell I like it? Very much. So it looks the part. So in central casting, if some movie company wanted a Civil War era engine, it looks the part and it gets the job, but for the sake of your passengers, there's something special about the inside of the train.
That's correct. This locomotive is patterned after a Rogers locomotive. You're talking circa 1860 into the 1870s, so just after the Civil War. Almost everything you see is exactly how it would have been in, say, 1870. The only modifications we would have made is instead of the brass water pumps, we use injectors. So you're talking 1930s technology. The other thing you'll notice making noise behind us is our air pump. That powers our whole air brake system. Now obviously 1860, 1870s, you wouldn't have had air brakes yet. So that's a modern advantage that we really appreciate.
Well, I bet. And what, back then they'd have that great big wooden whatever that they pull back on.
That's
and,
right. You would have had all hand brakes on
all
the cars.
hand brakes, yeah.
So it would have been all hand signals and hand brakes. We have air brakes and radios.
So it just makes it so much safer.
Oh, absolutely.
To do what you have to do. So you don't have any idea what the life expectancy of an engine like this is, do you?
Hopefully longer than mine.
And if you're doing a good job,
If I'm doing my job, it'll outlive me.
you can bring your grandchildren here someday
That's correct.
and say, look at what Grandpa did. It's still running. It takes a licking and keeps on ticking.
That's right.
That could be a slogan for something. I don't know. Okay, so now you've got this beautiful thing, and I guess you alternate it back and forth with a diesel locomotive.
We do. Yep. The
Yeah.
GP10 is what you see in front of you.
Yeah.
It's a big difference running them both. I'll tell you, it takes a little getting used to. With this steam engine, you're looking at about 500 horsepower. With the diesel, you're looking at about 1,800.
Yeah.
So, you know, and this is about a quarter of the weight that the diesel is. This is a lot lighter.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I knew that would be the diesel locomotive would be more powerful. I wasn't thinking about the weight.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The bare frame of our Jeep pretty much outweighs this steam engine.
Wow.
So just to put that into perspective.
Wow. Okay, so now there are people out there. There's like all different types of people. There are people who don't care about locomotives, but we're not going to talk to them. But there are people who just love trains and the history and lore of railroading, so they'll come here for that. And then you have the people who are Civil War buffs, and they'll come here for that.
Absolutely.
And the people who appreciate a really wonderful president of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, so they'll come here for that. So why don't you tell our audience about what's special about the rail right-of-way or the rail bed that we're going to be traveling on?
Basically, when you're riding our train, you're pretty much following the footsteps of Abraham Lincoln, because he'd have ridden on this line on his way to Gettysburg to give the Gettysburg Address. So we're basically living history. A lot of people will tell you he was actually writing most of that speech on this line.
See, I was going to ask you that. So,
right. So the historical significance just keeps on giving.
Yeah.
You know, it cannot be understated enough.
Yeah. And then, unfortunately, well, we know what. You know, no spoilers are necessary. No spoiler alerts are necessary. We know what happened to Mr. Lincoln at the theater, and then there was a funeral train that
correct.
Passed the same way.
That's correct. And this locomotive was largely patterned off of the funeral locomotive.
Oh.
That's basically what you would be looking at. You had a lot of the brass. The engine's got a little bit bigger as the years went by. As you can see, this is a 440 locomotive. This is actually a rather large 440 for the time period. Basically, this engine is dressed up to be more like a freight engine of that era. You've got the smaller drivers. You're looking at a 56-inch driver on this locomotive. Your passengers would be a little closer to 60. But the brass dresses it up for passenger service. They want it to look good. The gold leaf, the lettering, it's got to look good if it's going to haul passengers.
Okay, now we have the steam engine on the tracks, ready to go. Today, as we're doing this, the first trip out is going to be to Glen Rock?
Glen Rock.
Okay, and that'll be an hour round trip.
That's correct.
So, what are some of the things you have to be concerned about as the superintendent about just the track, the rail bed, stuff like that?
Well, obviously, this year we've received a lot of rain, so that's definitely a consideration. Rain always moves things. So trying to maintain your track is always a battle. So we have a Glen Rock trip today, that's a 10-mile round trip. And then we have a Hanover Junction, and that's twice the distance. So you're talking about a lot of track to maintain. And obviously, between Glen Rock and here, it's one big hill. So it's going to be a grade the whole way from Glen Rock to New Freedom. So it's uphill all the way. So that's when you start to hear this engine really work. It is working the entire way.
So to Glen Rock, it's
downhill to Glen Rock,
Oh,
so we'll be
downhill to
braking the
Glen
whole
Rock.
way,
Oh.
and then pulling it uphill the whole way back.
Oh, so it's a free ride to Glen Rock, and you're paying for
That's
it on the
correct.
way back.
So we're burning oil in 17, so our oil and water usage is almost nil going backwards to Glen Rock. All our oil and water consumption is on the way back.
I'm glad you mentioned the oil because, do I understand it correctly that you use recycled motor oil
We do.
to fuel it?
Recycled motor oil. We have one burner inside the firebox. It's actually patterned after a original oil burner circa 1880s, because a lot of these engines were oil from the get-go. They were converted straight from wood to oil. People mostly think of coal as far as steam engines, but most of your steam engines were burning oil.
Now, that'll make our ecologically minded people happy to know that that helps the recycling process.
It's true.
It's true. So I can't thank you enough. You're probably waiting to get back in the cab, Steve. And so thank you again, Steve Burkholder.
Absolutely.
Superintendent of Steam into History, New Freedom. And now we're going to do some other things down here. I'm working on the railroad. Well, I'm glad you're still with us here on location, and we're on location at Steam into History in New Freedom, Pennsylvania. And this lady over here is Sharon Dorn. And Sharon, what's a nice woman like you doing in the position of the Chief Executive Officer of a train outfit in New Freedom, Pennsylvania?
Well, the story goes back to, I think I talked with some folks earlier on the train. My grandfather worked on a caboose outside of Brownsville and Sharon, Pennsylvania, for which I'm named. And he would regale us in front of the fireplace with all of his antics and funny stories about serving on a caboose and trains and passengers and freight and all those kinds of things. So I got bitten by the bug at an early age. Then go forward about 50 years, and I was retained as the consultant for Steam into History's capital campaign, Get On Board. And the purpose of that capital campaign was to fund the building of track or repairs of track to take the train north, we hope ultimately into York City.
Well, for those of you who haven't been to Steam into History, it's amazing for any number of reasons. If you're a fan of trains in general, it's Steam into History. If you are a Civil War buff, Steam into History. If you have affection for President Abraham Lincoln, it's Steam into History. And you can probably tell better than I can about the connection between this organization or the train itself and the rail bed and Abraham Lincoln.
Sure. Abraham Lincoln rode on these very tracks on his way to Gettysburg to deliver the Gettysburg Address. He changed trains at the historic site, which is called Hanover Junction, on his way to Gettysburg to do that. And it's believed that along the way, he took off his top hat, put it on his lap, and edited the Gettysburg Address. So lots of history here, and we do have Abraham Lincoln on the train periodically, a wonderful historian.
As a matter of fact, we're sitting in the Lincoln coach right now.
That's right.
Which, as I hope you can see, is a marvelously restored railway car. And you know, you're talking to somebody here. I'm somebody who just, like her grandfather was in the caboose, and my dad was a rail car inspector for the New York Central Railroad, and you know, if you have a love of railroading at all, or even if you've only seen railroads on TV, or it just comes to life here in Steam Into History. So as you're watching the show, and if you have any interest, Sharon, what's coming up in the near future? What special events on the rails?
Well, this is our time to shine for sure. We all connect trains with the holidays, and what we're having right now they're called ghost track trains. We have a woman whose name is Nancy Pritt, and she's the ghost storyteller in Gettysburg, but she comes here to Steam Into History and starts her talk in what we believe is our haunted station. And then passengers board the train with Nancy, and she continues her talk about ghosts along the train. There are lots of stories about trains and ghosts. We also have fall foliage trains. The trees are starting to turn and going to be lovely in the next few weeks. And then the big man himself comes the day after Thanksgiving for our first Tannenbaum trains. And those trains will take you to a Christmas tree farm where you cut down your Christmas tree. You get there after you get off the coach by way of horse-drawn carriage. Cut down your tree, we bring it back to the station for you. Then you get back on the horse-drawn carriage, back on the train, and you come back to the station where your tree's waiting for you and some hot chocolate's waiting for you. So that's always fun.
Is the tree all wrapped up, ready to go on top of the car? Or?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah.
What a nice family outing and memory that would turn out to be.
It sure is. And folks come back year after year. It's great fun.
I should have asked you before, how long has Steam Into History been Steam Into History?
About 5 years.
5 years now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's we just got done on a ride. We took a trip up the tracks. I don't know, up the tracks, down the tracks, somewhere on the tracks, to Glen Rock, Pennsylvania, and that's an hour round trip. And then I know that during the regular season there's another trip up to, what is it, Hanover Junction?
Yes.
That's a 2-hour trip, but now that we are getting to the holiday season, I just think that what you just mentioned, the Tannenbaum tree trip, is just a sensational family deal. So something like this, the Steam Into History, is it just suggests to me that there had to be somebody somewhere who had a bright idea at some point. So who were the creators or the innovators of Steam Into History?
Well, the story goes that 2 York businessmen, one an attorney and one president of a company in York, got together on a corner in York City, and the 2 men were William Simpson and Reed Anderson. Bill was president of Falsgraf, and Reed is an attorney with Stock and Leader. And on that corner, in front of what was the Yorktown Hotel, which is now being restored also, decided that a train for York County was the right idea. It would provide economic benefit to the county and bring tourists here from all over the world, which it's done. In just 5 short years, we've had riders from 36 countries, and we've had a total of 100,000 riders.
100,000? Oh. And by the way, when you come up here, I mean, first of all, New Freedom, Pennsylvania is one of those cute little Pennsylvania towns. And you come up, you can make a day of it with the train ride and with local restaurants and other local sites around, and just enjoy the countryside in south central Pennsylvania, and you're right near the Mason-Dixon line. Right. So if you want to walk along the Mason-Dixon line, you can do something like that. And so, right. Sharon Dorn, it's been a real pleasure to be here at Steam Into History, and you'll probably see me and my family coming up here lots of times, and especially so I can bring up my 5-year-old granddaughter for Princess.
Great!
For Princess, that Princess trip, and I can have tea and cookies with her.
There you go.
So thank you for letting us come on.
Thank you, Ken. It's been a pleasure hosting you. We look forward to seeing the show.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks. Well, we've been on location in New Freedom, Pennsylvania, working on the railroad, learning all about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War and how the train goes down the track. That wonderful train that's a replica of a Civil War era train, just too much, so much fun. Thank you for joining us again right here on Location.